All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Financial Frontiers with Bruin Finance Society, the podcast where we explore the world of business and finance and is your home for all finance-related topics and news here at UCLA. I want to say, before we start the episode here, thank you guys for all of your support and dedication and listening to the podcast. We are currently on our third episode of the podcast here. So really appreciate you guys tuning in today. And today we're thrilled to have Brandon here joining us on the podcast. Brandon is a fourth-year economics student here at UCLA and is the founder and president of Pacific Consulting Group, or PCG for short, at UCLA, an organization that serves as a launch pad for students pursuing careers in consulting and business. Under his leadership, PCG has grown into a hub for technical training, community building, and mentorship, helping students connect with MBA candidates, industry professionals, and real-world clients. Brandon's journey is especially inspiring. He took a non-traditional path to UCLA, earning his GED and associate's degree before transferring in. Along the way, he's worked in many different things, from floral event design to working in audit at Baker Tilly as a summer intern. He is even currently working with international clients such as TeamUp and a Singaporean AI company. In this episode, we'll dive into more detail on his journey and his experiences that brought him to this point and learn what it takes to turn a vision like PCG into a reality. So let's get started. Brandon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Brandon Nguyen. I'm a fourth-year economics student here at UCLA. I'm a transfer student who grew up in Downey, California, so not too far from home. But, I grew up playing soccer and baseball for the majority of my life. I ended up sticking with soccer, left baseball behind after middle school. Love both sports, though. I grew up in a family with two litigation consultants, so I kind of grew up around that field. And my dad is actually a double Bruin, so he came here for his undergrad and his master's. He also played football. He was a starting wide receiver, Nguyen. My mom went to USC for her undergrad, so we always had that rivalry. But it's been great growing up and learning from them, and managed to get me here. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm excited to dive right into this episode with you, Brandon. So the first question I have for you is, what inspired you to start Pacific Consulting Group here at UCLA? And was there any specific moment that kind of like sparked that idea?
Yeah, so in coming to UCLA, you come here and you're wide-eyed, super excited to get into everything that UCLA has to offer. So myself and all my friends who are also transfers, we're going around to every single consulting or business club, tossing an application, seeing if we could even get a coffee chat past the application phase. It was just no after no after no after no. And we were confused because, we kind of thought, I feel like we're decent candidates. We could do well in this field, and come to find out that, yes, the transfer culture is great here at UCLA. The same cannot be said about business clubs. Majority of business clubs will take your application, see your transfer, gone. We're not even going to look at it. So, we didn't really think that was right. And we kind of didn't have anything we could do about it at the time, or didn't know that there was anything we could do about it. So we applied and applied and applied, wound up at BFS. In my application for BFS, I talked about consulting a lot. So Chris, the founder of BFS, actually had the idea of creating a consulting club. So he called in a bunch of people who he thought might be potential applicants for it, and we brainstormed, tried to figure out what the club would be, and I wound up as the role of president. So, it was with Chris's help that we managed to get the club off the ground and create what we have today as PCG.
That's awesome. Wow, I had no idea that BFS had involvement in the creation of PCG. That's really interesting. And I think what you said at the very beginning of how tough it is for people to find these opportunities, especially as a transfer student like yourself. just find these opportunities. I think it's just great that how that kind of like sparked your idea for PCG and how you created PCG with the intention of making it inclusive, right, for everybody. And I think that's really great. And like PCG, BFS has been around only for 2 years as well. It's relatively new. And I want to ask you, because we already covered this in the previous episode for BFS, but for PCG, given that it's been around for like a short amount of time and it's grown a lot in that short amount of time, what challenges have you faced building PCG from the ground up, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Sure. So first, some context. PCG has been active for 2 quarters. That is, 20 weeks. That's it. So in going into this endeavor, you're super excited. You see all the other consulting clubs. Oh, they do this, this, and this. That's how we're going to do it. It's going to be so much fun. Then you actually get there and you realize, shoot, I don't have anything to base this off of. When you're put into any position in the real world, you're told, you're in charge of A, B, and C. And it's your job to do the best that you can with those 3 things. Here at PCG, I was tossed in and it was kind of, you're the president. What do we do? And it was, oh my God, I have no idea what we do. How are we going to figure this out? So it's a huge struggle figuring out how to structure everything and how to get everything organized. You quickly learn that it's not easy. It's not just, oh, come do this and, we'll check back in 2 weeks. It's, you have to have things that are actionable that people need to do that they can work on. Because if not, everything's just kind of floating around in the ether. You kind of say, I want to do this, but you'll never get there unless you have the structure to do so. So structure has absolutely been our biggest pain point for sure. But, things are improving. Structure's never going to be perfect, but it will always get better, of course.
Yeah, definitely. That's how it is, especially starting up just very recently. And it's a great point that you bring up because, BFS has been around for 2 years and has undergone like a lot of different structural changes since the time that I joined, and now as being the community VP for BFS. So being part of exec now, like I've seen it all firsthand, how hard it really is, how time consuming it can be, and how, you have to just really have good time management skills. It's a lot to juggle with, academia and like other things going on in your life, other commitments, maybe even a job or anything like that. It's really a lot. It's a lot, and it's really impressive and something that is very admirable. So props to you for that. And I think it's just amazing to see, how much PCG has grown so far and where it'll go in the future.
Thank you.
So my next question for you is, how do you structure PCG to prepare students for consulting roles? And, given that there's so many organizations and clubs out there at UCLA, what sets your organization apart from all of these other ones?
Yeah, so PCG was created with the idea of breaking down the barrier to consulting. So like I've mentioned, a lot of the other consulting clubs will turn so many people away. And these people could be great candidates for them. But because you haven't spent a summer at McKinsey and won 3 case competitions, you're not getting in. So it's just these crazy barriers to entry, which I don't think is right. I think that you should find the best applicants regardless of their experience. Psych majors, you don't have to be an economics major. You can excel in these fields without a business background. You just need to be inquisitive. But if you're able to find these people and build them up, teach them what consulting even is, and then teach them how to case, teach them how to work with clients, etc. It's just, that's what school should be. We're all college students. We're in a learning environment. There is just such a restriction on learning when you create learning opportunities that are only for the people who have had the experience, had this and that. So we just really try hard to find applicants who are just inquisitive, who are social, who are very, very eager to learn, and teach them, what is consulting? What are the different types of consulting? What can you do in consulting? Teach them how to case, teach them how to create pitch decks and everything. And then once we kind of bring them up to speed, then we toss them with clients. We not only teach them all the essentials in consulting, but we also give them the clients where they're able to say in the future, I work with company X, Y, and Z, and looks great on their resume, hopefully helps them land a job in consulting in the future. So that's the goal.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think it's super important that every student who is interested in learning about consulting and all these different opportunities are out there. They deserve the chance to have that, As a student here at UCLA, they deserve to just have these opportunities available for them. And, the fact that we have all these clubs and organizations that are very restricted, it promotes this culture of elitism, kind of there's not a lot of inclusivity. And I think, it shouldn't matter if you have all these years of experience or, all these different internships and stuff like that, you worked at McKinsey or Bain or any of those firms right there. I think it's important that we include everyone, people who are starting with zero experience. So I think everyone deserves an opportunity to have, all these different opportunities. So, anyways, the next question I have for you is, what's one skill every aspiring consultant should master early on?
Yeah, so I would say one of the biggest things when it comes to consulting, specifically management consulting, when you're consulting for the future, giving recommendations, is to be very inquisitive. It's okay to be abstract, to try to figure out your own way of doing things, but make sure you are asking a lot of questions. You're probing for more information all the time. You always want to make sure that you are working off of a strong base whenever coming up with recommendations. So understand the context, understand how the company operates, understand how the market operates around the company, maybe what makes them profitable or not so profitable, and, take all those ideas and be able to make them very clear and very concise. So being a consultant, being as concise as possible is just essential for the field. Because a lot of the time you are working with CEOs, you're working with upper level management, and you have this idea that you need to pitch to them. They don't want to read a 30-page report on this. They want to look at a quick pitch deck with pictures that makes everything clear and ask you questions about it. So if you're able to present something in a way that is very concise and very clear, it saves a lot of time in their day, and it displays how intelligent you are as a consultant. So they're more willing to work with you in the future, etc. So that is a big, big part of consulting. And I would say everyone should master that skill. And another huge one is working as a team. So as a consultant, it's extremely important to bounce ideas off of each other to make sure that your ideas are valid and that you can actually present them. So it kind of gets difficult sometimes because you'll have this idea that you feel is amazing and maybe not everyone in the crowd thinks it's amazing. So it's kind of give and take. What can you contribute? What are you okay with not contributing? The team aspect is definitely huge in consulting.
Yeah, definitely. I think it almost kind of functions like as a student, right? A lot of these professionals, what they're looking for is someone that's sharp, someone that's clear and very concise, like you just described. And they really just want people that are, very, they use their time effectively, right? And when it comes to management, that's what they're looking for. These interviewers as well, when they're interviewing people for these consulting roles, they're looking for someone that's quick, that's very clear, and just they know what they're talking about, right? Because a lot of consulting is being very good at communication, knowing what you're talking about, because you can talk about a lot of different things, come up with all these different solutions and things like that. But if you're not clear and concise, like they're gonna think you're just yapping pretty much,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. So I think, yeah, those are great points for sure. And I want to add on to this question a little bit, see if you have any more advice for our audience that's currently listening in right now. You know, we have a lot of people that are interested in consulting within BFS and in general. Anyone that's tuning in, do you have advice for them that are for people that are trying to become a consultant, or at least somewhat interested in it?
Sure. I would start by saying YouTube is your best friend. You know, if you're interested in consulting, interested in casing, there are a million different channels who will kind of tell you about different industries, teach you how to break into consulting. They have guidelines, etc. You know, on top of that, it sucks and it's not fun. It's awkward, but reaching out to people, you know, trying to have a little coffee chat with a consultant, try to make a connection. Not only that, but also reaching out to friends and family. You know, if you have anyone in the field, utilize them. Ask, you know, hey, is there anyone I can talk to, speak to? Because the reality of it is, if you have two equal candidates and one of those candidates has a relationship with a consultant at the firm, they're the one getting it. So it's more finding ways to get your foot in the door than knowing everything there is to know about consulting. You know, once you're able to present yourself and show that you are inquisitive and intelligent and you've done your research, that's what gets you there. But the hard part is getting in front of them, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, this has been said time and time again, but it's just super important for everyone out there listening to know that networking is essential. It's crucial. It's part of business. It's what makes up business, really. Because at the end of the day, you know, you're communicating with a lot of different people. You're communicating with clients. You just have to be a good communicator, and it's part of the field. So I think, you know, if you're interested in consulting, like, it's really good to just get your foot in the door as soon as possible and start networking with people that are in the field, that are in consulting. You know, go to these industry events, career fairs, networking nights, whatever it is, like, attend as many as you can and meet as many people as you can. And that way you're not only, you know, meeting new people, but you're also, like, learning different things from them, you know, any insights that you can gather, which will be crucial for you when you're, for example, interviewing. I think that's super important. You know, another thing that's really important when it comes to landing a consulting career is knowing how to do those interviews, knowing how to do those cases as well. So super crucial there. Now, I know that, you know, you're fourth year, so you're unfortunately leaving us.
Yep.
You're graduating really soon, and I know most of the board as well for PCG is also leaving.
all of the board, actually.
All of the board. Okay.
Yeah,
All of the
so-
board's leaving. So, you know, given that, I want to ask you, like, what are your long-term goals for PCG moving forward, you know? And how do you see it evolving within the next couple of years?
Yeah. So, you know, given that PCG is so new and I already have to get out of here, it's difficult to focus on the future when I'm focusing on right now. But I would say I want PCG to become the go-to club for anyone who has the slightest of interest in consulting. You know, I want it to be a club with a reputation of, you don't need to know anything. We're going to teach you everything, and we're going to give you these amazing clients, these amazing opportunities. I want to make consulting more accessible to everyone. And once we kind of achieve that goal on the UCLA campus, I want to branch out to other campuses, because UCLA isn't the only school with a problem with consulting and business clubs. You know,
Yeah.
there are plenty of clubs at plenty of colleges, prestigious colleges, where it's so much harder to get into the business and consulting clubs than it is to get into the actual school, which isn't right, in my opinion. So, you know, we just want to be that go-to resource to make consulting more accessible and make sure the doors aren't closed for applicants who would have been amazing if given the chance. So.
Yeah, I think that's something very admirable of you, that you started this organization with that long-term vision of providing that opportunity to all these students and making sure every student has the chance to get involved in consulting and pursue a career in consulting if they wish to do so. And I think that's super important. And it really is a huge problem, like nationally, like in a lot of different colleges and universities. It really is an epidemic. If you think about it. It's something that, you know, I really, really am appreciative of people like you who are, you know, striving to work against, you know, this culture that we have of, you know, elitism, you know, and like making sure that everyone has that chance and opportunity. I think it's super crucial for sure. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why I'm here with BFS. I think BFS has opened a lot of different opportunities for me as a student coming in. And I've learned a lot of stuff that I had no idea of, like, before coming to college. You know, I didn't really know too much about, you know, business and finance, and coming into an organization like BFS where they teach you everything from the ground up, I think is super important. And like I said, I think PCG is doing amazing with that, with consulting specifically. So really, really great job, and I'm proud of what you guys have done. So
thank you.
Yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about is, of course, you're a transfer student and you have a non-traditional path, which is also very inspirational and admirable in itself. I want to, you know, talk about your transfer experience and how that has kind of come to play at UCLA. And maybe you have advice for people that are tuning in right now, like that are also transfer students, who might be navigating things like imposter syndrome, or you know, any kind of uncertainty moving forward as a transfer student. I know it can be very difficult at times, and you know, there's limited opportunities as well. So I'd like to hear more about your experience.
Sure. So I had a very non-traditional path to come to UCLA. You know, most of the students here are studs in high school. You know, they get amazing grades, they come in here, they continue to excel at UCLA. I'm not saying I was a slouch in high school by any means. So, you know, I was a straight A student, almost. You know, I got my first B in biology, sorry. You know, I was playing extremely competitive soccer. We were ranked 7th in the country. I captained that team. So it was practice 4 times a week, 2 hours a day, in Los Angeles. So I had to drive over all the time. It was a lot of time, a lot of energy. So, you know, I would say I was doing pretty well for myself in high school. But come sophomore year, I kind of started slowing down. You know, I had my foot on the gas my entire life, and I started to run out of gas, and I kept trying to push and push and push. And one day I couldn't anymore. And it was the weirdest feeling, because I was fine mentally, but physically I was freaking out. You know, I developed an anxiety disorder called panic disorder. So basically I went from being this excelling student athlete to spending a year stuck in bed. So I would have panic attacks. I had no control over them. I would barely eat. You know, I didn't finish high school because of it. You know, I got a GED, so I took the CHESP test. It's a high school equivalent, but you can only go to community college with it. So I wound up at a community college, having not really been in a classroom for a year or two. And, you know, I failed the first class I was in. And then I failed the second class I was in. And I went, what is going on? You know, I know how to do school, but I had just been out of the classroom for so long. It was a huge transition, a huge struggle. But taking baby steps, I slowly got to a full load, and I managed to get great grades in community college and eventually transfer here, which was amazing. You know, there was a time I didn't know if I would ever go back to school or even work in the future. So it's huge doing that. And, you know, you get here, you go through all that struggle, and you are met with the kids who didn't have that struggle, you know, who have 3 internships, and, you know, there's so much going on. So imposter syndrome is just extremely prevalent at this school. Any prestigious university, it's going to be extremely prevalent. And I've absolutely experienced it, but I think I've done a decent job at mitigating it by just understanding that the people around me are people. And, they're nothing more than that at the end of the day. And that's always been my view when it comes to, celebrities or people who excel in their field. Yes, I aspire to be at that level one day, and I think what they've done is amazing. But at the end of the day, I am on an equal playing field with them. It's not like there's some sort of God. They bleed like I bleed. So it's recognizing that all the people who are in this room with you also got into UCLA. You were at that same level. You're at that UCLA level. And a lot of the time, when you talk to people who are outside of this UCLA bubble, you say, I go to UCLA, and they go, what? You go to UCLA? That's insane. And you kind of go, oh, shoot. Yeah, no, it is. So it's just perspective. That's the biggest thing. And not getting into your own head too much, not thinking, I need to be the next man on the moon to be successful and be somebody. You're already doing great for yourself. So,
yeah. Very impressive, very inspirational story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. It really is about perspective when you think about things, when you think about it in the bigger picture, right? We're all UCLA students here. We have, similar backgrounds when it comes to, academia, classes we took in high school, how much effort and time we put into things to get here, right? Because it's not easy getting here.
No.
It's huge. It's a big thing. It's a lot of time and effort that you have to put into different things to get here. And I mean, like for you, for example, like it was a lot of hard work, a lot of things going on in your life that, really limited you, but here you are.
Yeah.
Here you are. And that's like the most impressive thing is, just hearing about your story. It's amazing how, you didn't finish high school, you got your GED, and then you got your associates, and then you transferred here.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're here with everyone else.
Yeah, long time coming,
yeah. That's very, very impressive. So, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, very, very inspirational story. So, the next question I have for you is, I know you just interned at Baker Tilly this past summer. So I'm really interested to hear more about your experience. You interned in audit, right?
Yes,
Accounting. So I'd like to hear more about your experience with that. And do you have any advice for people also looking for internships currently?
Yeah, I mean, biggest thing is career fairs and utilizing the people that you know in different fields. It's awkward to reach out to your aunt and uncle and say, hey, can you help me get this job? But that's how the business world operates. So utilize those things. I got my internship because I went to an accounting event over the summer and I recognized the recruiter. And it was immediately, oh, hey, weren't you at this accounting event? And then we started talking and got the first round a couple days later. It happened very, very quickly. But perseverance is a huge one because you will be rejected by so many companies until one tells you yes. So just keeping your head up, continuing to just try again. In terms of the actual internship, internships a lot of the time are a lot less scary than you think they are. Once you start to realize that, hey, this company needs me as much as I need them, it kind of gets rid of that fear that you have. Where yes, you need to do the best job that you can. You need to work hard, be social, etc. But it's not like they have this crazy power over you. They're investing all this time and money to have you on their team. That's not cheap. They're paying you a lot of money to be there. So that's a big thing. In terms of skills, taking notes, gigantic, big deal. Whether it's your laptop or a notebook, if you have a higher up explain something to you, you better take notes. If you go through this, my manager was talking about this one intern that they had, and he spent 30 minutes explaining how to do something, and the intern gets to the computer, sits there for 15 minutes, doesn't know what to do, goes back and says, I forgot. And, they didn't get a return offer because you just need to be on top of those things, make sure that you are actively listening, actively learning. And on top of that, don't be afraid to ask questions. If they send you off to do a task, if you don't come back in 15 minutes with questions, they're confused. You're not an expert at this. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Try to figure it out on your own for, 10, 15 minutes first. If you're spinning your wheels, go ask someone, be social. Another big one that's very underrated is respond to messages and emails very quickly. It was my goal over my internship. If I get messaged on Microsoft Teams, I want to respond within 30 seconds. It just shows that you are attentive, that you're active, that you're eager to work. It's a great quality to have. You don't want to go ghost on them. So, I think those things will help you a lot in your future internships and finding them even.
Yeah, definitely. I think, it goes hand in hand with what we were discussing with the networking thing and like how important it really is. Just being communicative and asking questions, trying to learn as much as you can, being inquisitive. Like, these are important skills that are needed not only within the realm of consulting, but just in general when you're looking for an internship, whether it is consulting or, investment banking or accounting, whatever it is. It's super important to, be attentive and ask those questions because like you said, you're not expected to be an expert all of a sudden just because you're, working at the firm now or, you're an intern. They expect you to not know that much. Like that's the point of being an intern. You're working at the firm. You're trying to learn as much as you can from the firm while you're doing the internship. So, I'd say take advantage of all the resources that you have currently. Even if you don't have an internship right now, there's a lot of different opportunities to learn and grow. There's so many resources out there and, it's all about, the time and effort that you put into these things. Like I mentioned earlier, if you really want something, there's a lot of resources out there and it really just takes the initiative to find those things. And, we're really fortunate enough to have organizations like BFS and PCG, providing these opportunities for students that have like zero experience, like we mentioned previously. I think that's super important to really just get your foot in the door and start learning about these things. And then from there, you want to continue working hard and networking, meeting people, and, eventually, like, it's amazing once you see you have offers coming in, internship offers. It feels really nice to just have that. Yeah. So yeah, that's super important advice. So thank you for sharing that advice. Thank you. Yeah. So next thing I want to talk about is, which I'm really curious to learn about, because you mentioned that you've consulted with international clients, namely one being Team Up, and you've worked on a Singapore AI internship, I think, or partnership, excuse me. How did these opportunities come about, and can you just talk a little bit more about your experience with this?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So with these opportunities, they're not coming from me.
Okay.
Networking, creating relationships is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Actually, the people at BFS have found most of these opportunities, and they put me in contact. I'm more than happy to work with them and figure that stuff out. So it's been really, really exciting. So we've been working with a Singaporean AI startup called Co-Founder for about a year now. Basically, what Co-Founder is it's a tool for consultants to use. So it's kind of not your traditional client where you are consulting for them, trying to figure something out. Co-Founder, we are testing their product. So we want to use Co-Founder to consult in the future. And it's a very powerful program where you're able to input a lot of context about a company. You're able to answer a lot of questions. You're given about an hour of prompts, right? And through this hour of prompts, it comes up with a bunch of different ideas, ways to manage your business, utilize different things, maybe cut costs. And it puts it all into one very concise space where you get your AI agent and you're able to say, hey, can you create a business plan for this company? Can you create a website for this company? What are some things we can do to improve? And it gets to the extent where you can even use co-founder in your actual websites as assistants. You can teach it, this is my company, this is how you answer this question, and this question, and boom, now you don't have to pay someone to man the service lines.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
extremely powerful. It can get months worth of work done in a couple of hours. So we're really excited to use it in the future.
Yeah.
In terms of TeamUp's been great working with them. They're a startup originated in Kazakhstan. They create software to facilitate pickup games. So this is pickup soccer, pickup basketball, etc. So here at UCLA, we have a group chat, and it has about 2,000 people in it. And someone texts, "Does anyone want to play soccer?" That's how we do it. So it's not streamlined at all. They're creating an app to make it very easy to one, rent fields, and two, find people to actually play these games. So they are trying to solidify their presence on college campuses and find some, engineers. We're trying to help them do that. So we're brainstorming, creating pitch decks, etc. It's been a lot of fun. It's a great experience for everyone in the club so far.
That's really interesting. Yeah. The whole idea with AI, AI being the future, I think that's really, really interesting to hear about, especially when it comes to my personal experience at my past internship this past summer. There's a huge emphasis on AI and all these different AI models and how it helps, with all these different fields in business, right? So I also had an accounting rotation internship last summer at one of the big four. So that huge emphasis on AI was really, really interesting to hear about. And now that you're bringing it up with co-founder, I think that's really interesting to hear, and how that will shape the future of these fields. And I really found it interesting how you said, the workload of things, AI can do it in a matter of hours instead of months. I think that's ridiculous.
No, it is.
It's mind-blowing to hear about. So it's really crazy to think about. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Really interesting projects that you're working on and clients.
So, yeah, we're excited.
Yeah, that's great. So next question I have for you is, you've worked in a lot of different things and fields throughout, your life. You've worked at Target, you've tutored kids, you've managed floral events. How have all these different experiences and varied roles helped you in professional settings like consulting and accounting? Yeah,
so in any field, I would argue that it is more important for you to be a people person than it is for you to be an accountant, a consultant. You can absolutely excel at these jobs that you do, but if you can't hold a conversation, if you can't resolve conflict, that's a big problem. So in doing all of these other jobs, you get to meet so many different people from so many walks of life, and they give you so many different problems. So, you will get horrible customers who you have to figure out, why are they upset? How can I help them with this? I think one of the biggest things was, one, volunteering, figuring out how each kid operates and figuring out how I can help this kid is very difficult, and it really helps you understand each person that you speak with and meet their specific needs. I remember one instance, this kid playing Pokemon on his laptop, and his game save data got deleted. And he's crying. All the other people are, it's just a game, who cares? I'm like, no, dude, I know how that feels. It sucks. And I talked with him, made him feel better, just validating feelings is huge. And, working in floral design, I'm setting up weddings all the time. You deal with all these people who need everything to be perfect. So it's figuring out, how can I best accommodate this person? How can I calm them down? And all those skills transition into any field that you're going to go into. If you're able to just talk with people, understand them, make conversation, comment on the things that they like, they're going to bring you into their teams. There are plenty of people who are wildly underqualified who get into these spectacular roles because they're people's people. They know how to talk. So that's by far the biggest takeaway you can have from a job outside of your profession.
Yeah, definitely. Again, it all comes down to like, taking the initiative and going out there and meeting people and, speaking to people, gather as much insight and advice as you can, because all of this will help you out in the long run. It doesn't necessarily need to be just for interviews. Like, it'll help you just expand your knowledge overall across the board. So I think it's just important that people just take advantage of those things and resources. And being a people pleaser is
huge.
It's huge. It really is a huge factor when it comes to the opportunities that you have and the chances that you get with different things in these fields. So it's great to hear about your experiences too with tutoring kids and managing floor events and the weddings. So it's really, really interesting how you've done so many different things. I think that's great experience to have overall too. Just like being able to do a lot of different things and learn from all these different things. I've worked with kids too, actually. Back in high school, I would work, or I would volunteer, at a daycare. And, it really is important to understand what the other person's feeling, be in their shoes. Because, you can, it's like you said, you can say like, oh yeah, it's just a game, right? It's a Pokemon game, like whatever, move on, But are you, you're not being empathetic. You're not really understanding, the situation for that person.
Yeah.
You don't know what they're feeling. Just because it's a game doesn't mean like it doesn't, affect them.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. Just being understanding and having that perspective. Perspective is super important, right? Like you mentioned this earlier too, like having that perspective on things.
Yeah.
And really understanding where people are coming from. So, really great advice there. My next question for you is, and we ask this on every episode,
Sure.
every person. So, if you could recommend one book or any piece of media, so whether it be a show or a movie or anything like that, finance related or not, that everyone should look into, what would it be and why?
So mine is a little bit niche. I'm not the biggest reader. I'm working on that. I'm trying to read a book about anthropology. I think it's super interesting. But I would say there's this YouTube channel. It's called Miles Carter. So I haven't kept up to date with a lot of his newer stuff, but I was on his channel a lot a couple of years ago, and he has these, amazingly poetic videos on, whether it be love, heartbreak, loss, self-doubt. There's these stories that he creates, and it's just extremely calming, extremely touching. These videos have brought me to tears before, and these are at low points. So a lot of the time I'm turning somewhere for help, trying to figure out what to do next, and being able to confide in someone who makes himself vulnerable and can relate to what you're feeling and kind of, make all of those feelings, all of those visions clear is huge. So, that's kind of my go-to if I'm ever struggling with something or I need to just ground myself.
Got it. I see. Thank you very much for that. That's really, really great information. I recommend everybody to check the YouTube channel out. I will be personally checking it out myself. I'm really intrigued to see what content there is. So, thank you for that. Before we wrap things up here, I want to ask you one more question, and this is kind of a more general question, but it will really serve our audience here that are currently tuning in right now. What's one piece of advice or word, keyword, you wish you had received when you first started your journey?
That one isn't very hard for me. So the advice that I wish I received before I got to UCLA, before I started doing all this, is your path doesn't need to be linear. And you are told about success after success after success. When you hear about someone's story, no one talks about all the struggle and all the redirection it took to get there. It's just not highlighted. So when I was growing up, I always thought, I need to have a 4.5 in high school. I need to be an amazing athlete. I need to go straight to UCLA. I need to do something amazing after that. When in reality, you have so much time. You don't need to take the fast track. It's okay to do things your way. One of the things that I kind of live by and have been trying to live by recently is the term stop and smell the flowers. So I get caught up so often in, what's next? How can I keep going? How can I do better? And I forget to just enjoy that I'm here. And, stop and smell the flowers. I'll be walking on campus, speed walking to my dorm to try to get something done. And I'll take a second and I'll just look around and say, I'm at UCLA. This is so cool. I'm so happy that I can be here. And it helps me ground myself. It helps me not get too caught up in that race to the finish line. Because, once I get to that finish line, what's next? Right. I have no idea. I love the process to get there and I forget that. So just not being so laser focused on the end goal is a big one. Yeah.
I see. Really, really interesting. Really great expression right there. I've never heard that one before. Stop and smell the flowers. Yeah, I think it's super important to just take a breather, really take in everything that's around you and, it's important to just not get stressed out. I know it's hard as college students, to not get stressed out. I mean, of course, there's so many things going on in our lives as college students, but sometimes, a quick breather, just maybe even taking a walk. I personally do that. I take walks around UCLA. I go on runs too. It really helps clear the mind and really, and like you said, everyone's at their own pace. Nothing's linear. Everyone's is, working on different things and working at their own pace. They say it's a rat race, but it
doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a rat race. Everyone's at their own pace, and everyone has a different definition of what success means to them, and that success can come, at any time. So, really, I think it's important that people, focus on themselves, their well-being, and be appreciative and grateful of the current position that they're in, and to just, really see things in the bigger picture. There's so much more out there to enjoy, so many more opportunities to invest your time in. There's just so many things out there, and as college students, we tend to think, oh, I gotta do this, I gotta get this, so many things going on in our life, so many busy stuff, but it's just important to really just reflect ourselves for a bit and, just do really small things to just clear your mind, like taking a walk. That's all it takes, honestly, and that's what I do personally. So
that's it.
Yeah. Okay. That wraps up our podcast episode for today. Podcast episode 3 with Brandon and Pacific Consulting Group. Thank you so much, Brandon, for coming onto the podcast today. It was a pleasure having you.
Yeah, thank you so much to you and BFS for having me. It was a great experience. So.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and supporting the podcast. And we'll see you in the next episode of Financial Frontiers with Bruin Finance Society. See you, everyone.